Hi friends, I hope you all feel well. Thanks for joining us. My name is Julia, happy to get together with you today. Before we start, I would like to remind you that increased energy, resistance to disease, and overall vitality are but a few benefits of being in optimal health. I believe that you are interested in understanding and managing your health. You absolutely can do it. Biohacking Congress provides the community with the best tools and biohacks that could help you to set up your healthy goals and better manage your health. Please join us on social media and attend our events. We host events often. You can find the list on our Eventbrite. Now, I just would like to invite you to our big virtual Biohacking Congress that will be on July 17th. There you have to be if you are interested in becoming the best version of yourself. Today, our webinar on the topic Health Optimization, Medicine and Practice. Do you know that the key to being and staying healthy is prevention? Sure you know that. You know that better to be resistant to disease than to treat disease. So, health optimization medicine specialists take care of health or disease prevention. And health optimization medicine is shifting the paradigm away from illness and cultivating healthiness by applying the sciences of clinical metabolomics, gut microbiota, immune system, chronobiology, bioenergetics, epigenetics, and exposomics. What all that? Our great speakers will tell us about this today, and you will be able to ask your questions. Our speakers today: Dr. Scott Sherr is a board internal medicine physician certified to practice health optimization medicine and a specialist in hyperbaric oxygen therapy. One more speaker with us, Boomer Anderson, is the founder and podcast host at Decoding Superhuman and Chief Organizing Officer for Europe for Health Optimization Practice non-profit organization. And also with us, Dr. Sherr is internal medicine physician, health optimization medicine chief connector, and practitioner engagement specialist. Hello, Scott, Boomer, Sherr. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for supporting us on our mission, and tell us more about yourself.
Amazing. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Mick, for the platform here. Yeah, let's do a little bit of an introduction. Dr. Pai, I would love to hear a little bit more about you, my friend. Let's hear a little bit more about what's going on in Los Angeles today.
Current state in Los Angeles is we're all at shelter in place, right? But just a little bit about my background. I'm a physician trained in internal medicine, and in the process of trying to solve my weight and mental health issues, I learned a lot about nutrition, different lifestyle factors, and biohacking. And eventually this took me down a path that led me to discover our mentor, Dr. Ted Achacoso, who pioneered health optimization medicine.
Dr. Sherr, would love to hear more about yourself, my friend.
Good morning from San Francisco, everybody. I am happy to be here. Julia, thanks for having us, as Boomer said. And I was actually thinking, Dr. Sherr, I met Dr. Sherr about 4 years ago on his journey, as he's described it in very brief there, through the work that I do in hyperbaric medicine. But it was actually Sherr here who brought me along, and I am very grateful for the introduction to our mutual mentor, the three of us, Dr. Ted, who pioneered the practice of health optimization medicine, which has become the foundation of my integrative hyperbaric practice that I run virtually and in person in San Francisco, along with being an internal medicine physician and working part-time as a hospital physician as well, and doing the whole pandemic thing.
And my name's Boomer Anderson, and I work with entrepreneurs to help them optimize their health so that they can go out and change the world. But I also met, actually through Scott, I had the pleasure of meeting our mentor, Dr. Ted Achacoso, and along the way met Dr. Sherr and a whole bunch of other people. And what really kind of opened my eyes about this whole world of health and what we're going to talk about today is I was involved in the biohacking scene for a number of years. And biohacking to me, like at that time, I was spending all this money on technology gadgets, but really didn't have a framework for it. And so when I met Dr. Scott and then subsequently Dr. Ted, what I really realized was that health optimization medicine in practice is that framework. And so as we go through the webinar today, we're going to lay out sort of what is health optimization medicine in practice for everybody, but also how that serves as what I think is the best framework out there for biohacking and judging whether or not your biohacks are successful. But Julia, if it's okay with you, I want to just kick things off and we'll just go into it. Is that all right?
Yes, right. So please, let's start our discussion and let's go to webinar room without live.
So let's move forward with this webinar. And this webinar is going to be slightly different from other webinars that you've attended in that we're going to try and make this as interactive as possible. We're sitting virtually in so many different places. I'm in Amsterdam, Scott's in San Francisco, Sherr is in LA, and I believe, Yulia, are you in Ukraine right now?
Yeah, I'm in Kiev right now. Yes.
Okay, so we've got many different time zones covered. So what I'd love to hear from those participants tuning in right now is if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's something called chat, and there's something called Q&A. If you go into the chat right now and just drop in exactly where you're tuning in from, because we've got collectively at least 12 different time zones represented here, and I would love to hear just what cities people are tuning in from. Now, as we mentioned earlier, that this webinar is going to be a little bit different than others in that we want to have a discussion around the topic of health optimization medicine and practice, particularly as it relates to biohacking, because after all, we're at the Biohacking Congress webinar. So we want to lay out for people this beautiful framework that you can use for optimizing and really evaluating all of your biohacks. And without further ado, let's jump right into it, shall we? All right, city and country, put it in that chat right there. If you have any questions at any point, there's also a Q&A button down there. Throw in your questions and let us know what you want to hear towards the end. We're going to go through just a brief discussion between the three of us. And then at the end of that discussion, we're going to open it up for Q&A. But first things first, I think it's worth defining terms, as our mentor likes to say, and getting into exactly what is health optimization medicine in practice. Dr. Pai, I would love to just pick your brain right now, if you can just elucidate for the people listening right now, what is home hope?
Okay, so health optimization medicine is for doctors and health optimization practice is for non-doctor practitioners. It's a clinical framework that's different from other practices. Traditionally, there's been a focus at the organ level, and we have specialists for different organs, such as cardiologists, nephrologists, hepatologists, neurologists, hematologists. But health optimization medicine brings it down to the cellular level. We look at the health of the basic cell and the organelles. And in the functioning of the basic cell, metabolites are thrown out, and we can measure them to assess the functioning of the cell. For example, in the processing of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, certain metabolites are created and they're measurable. And if we take a step back, the way we can think about illness medicine is that it's like caring about your car after you have a flat tire. Whereas in health optimization medicine, we have maintenance and early warning lights, and the metabolites give us these early warning alerts. Illness medicine diagnoses and treats disease, and health optimization medicine detects and corrects imbalances.
Amazing. Now, Mick, I believe there's a couple of things popping up in the Q&A right now about the chat being disabled. So if it's possible, if we can reinstall that chat, I would love to just hear where people are tuning in from right now, because this is obviously a global webinar and we want to know where in the world you are. But Dr. Pai, coming back to you again, this whole idea of health requires a definition as well, because I mean, health is not just the absence of disease, right? And so can we just double click a little bit on what is health?
Yeah, sure, Boomer. Well, in health optimization medicine, the way I think Dr. Ted brilliantly put it, he makes health the definition of it A plus B plus C. And A is the absence of disease, which tends to be the focus of illness medicine and other types of practices such as functional medicine and integrative medicine. And then plus B, the balance of anabolic and catabolic processes, according to C, the cycle of life of the organism. And this is important because, a child has different anabolic and catabolic processes relative to an adolescent, to an adult, and to someone over 65.
Awesome. So I want everybody to continue to just pop in where you're tuning in from in the chat, but also if you feel like you've been shelter in place for way too long and you really need a haircut, can you just give me a 1 in the chat right now? Because I feel like I need a haircut. I'm having trouble controlling what's going on up top here. In fact, I needed a lot of hair gel today. But when
at least you don't dye your hair, Boomer. That'd be
not yet.
There's
not
a huge
yet.
challenge with that right now. It's getting out of stock at the stores. You can't find the hair coloring stuff anymore.
Yeah, you can't find hair coloring. You can't find toilet paper. It's a little bit crazy at this moment. So, Dr. Sherr, you and I had a conversation, I think about a year ago now, and we were discussing all things hyperbaric oxygen therapy, but also there was a term that came up which really, really grabbed me in a good way. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very, very pertinent for today's discussion around this idea of health optimization, medicine, and practice. And that was the holobiont. Mm-hmm. The holobiont is not a term that's typically familiar to most people, but I think it should be. Can we just discuss the holobiont in detail here?
Sure. And to give you credit, Boomer, you did a fantastic job in your TED Talk as you described the holobiont. And it's a term that I wasn't familiar with, but it's been in the literature for the last several years. And this is something that's become more, I think, visible to all of us on this call. At least Dr. Ted gave this information to all three of us in the sense that we think of ourselves as humans. We think of ourselves as having human cells, but we forget that we're made up of a lot of different things. We're made up of bacteria, virus, fungus. We're made up of metabolites from the environment around us, like toxins and perfumes and all these other kinds of crazy other pollutions that are happening all around us. So we're not just made of human cells. We're made of this sort of holo-organism, you can call it, this environment that includes not only human, but the rest of us that make us up. And so the holobiont is this term to describe what is all of us. These metabolites that we can measure that Dr. Sherr was talking about, we can actually measure the holobiont metabolites at the metabolomic level, which we'll talk about. And this is what the focus of health optimization medicine and practice is all about. And so the idea is, again, this framework that makes things, I think, more understandable for people, because I think we get sort of organelle focused, or we get system focused, or we get organ focused. And so we forget that there's this huge component, this network component to all of these things that are happening together. And so the holobiont is how we describe health optimization medicine. This is what we're detecting and correcting, as Dr. Sherr said as well. And we like to call Dr. Ted the father of holobiont hacking, just like we have others that are called the fathers of biohacking, because it's his pioneering work here that we've used now in our own practice to help optimize health in our clients. And that's what I'm doing all the time here in the Bay.
Mm-hmm. And, Yulia, I didn't tell you this before, but maybe we should have renamed the webinar the Holobiont Hacker. We can talk about that later. But there's this very intricate framework and kind of pillars of health optimization, medicine, and practice. In fact, there's 7 of them. And what we want to do is, because everybody here tuning in, and I see that we're tuning in from anywhere from Silicon Valley, Los Angeles seeking haircut. I love that, by the way. And by the way, if you are in need of a haircut, please put a 1 in the chat. But also we have people in Romania too. And so earlier I promised that we would get into how health optimization medicine and practice is a good framework for all of this biohacking that you're doing. You don't necessarily have to go out and try every gadget like I did before. And it's a very elegant solution for what is becoming a lot of decision fatigue for people. And so I want to delve into those 7 pillars. And the first one we want to start with, that Scott already alluded to, and actually Sherr already alluded to, is the science of metabolomics. So Dr. Pi, you're one of the people that I call quite often when I have questions about metabolomics. Do you mind just explaining for the people out there listening that are saying, hey, metabolomics sounds a little bit like genetics, what is metabolomics?
Sure, Boomer. And first, I'd like to say I am glad that Dr. Ted is not in the audience.
We don't know yet.
unless he has disguised his name. Okay. So metabolomics is the field that encompasses small molecules, also known as metabolites, that are within our cells, fluids, tissues, and organisms. And the metabolome is the collection of all these metabolites and their interaction within the biological system. Exogenous agents such as food, microbes, drugs, and plants lead to type of metabolites that we can measure, but also our own endogenous cellular processes produce metabolites. And then the question is, well, why do we even care about metabolites? Well, one thing that's really popular today is looking at the genome or DNA sequences. That's why people go and get 23andMe testing, or you can even get your whole genome sequenced. But at that DNA or genomic level, it shows you a potential of what can happen. Whereas if you look at the metabolome, it's actually giving you a window into cellular processes that have happened or are currently happening. So it gives you like a window into the current state of what's going on in your body.
Mm-hmm.
Real time.
Yeah, real time. And so I like to think of genetics as sort of the blueprint and kind of where you potentially could go or where you potentially should be. But metabolomes are exactly where you are now, or metabolomics is where you are now.
And as practitioners, Boomer, that's what we care about, right? We care about what's happening right now because that's something that we can actually do something about. Genetics is these risks that you may have over the long term, but your genes aren't your destiny. And I'm sure many of you have heard that before. This is something that I'm emphatic about with my clients as well. And so what we can do is we can optimize and balance in real time on the metabolomic level to really help people and sustain their health over a long period of time. That's the idea.
As I promised before, this is going to be an interactive session, guys. So Mick, if I can get your help right now to cue the first question for everybody, would love to know if you guys have tried nootropics out there. So if we can pop that question into the Q&A. Have you tried nootropics before? Yes or no? It's a simple yes or no question. But with that, we're going to carry on to pillar 2, which is a subject that I have become obsessed with because my sleep was horrid a few years ago. And Shaker, you and I have talked about this quite a bit. So Dr. Pi, can we talk chronobiology? Why should we care, and what exactly is chronobiology?
All right, sure, Boomer. So chronobiology, another pillar of health optimization medicine, as you stated, it involves the study of biological rhythms, and one of the most popular types of biological rhythms that we're all familiar with, and it's a very important one, are circadian rhythms. And these are rhythms that happen on a daily pattern, circa dia, about a day. So why do these daily rhythms matter? Well, I like to think of the body as a factory, and having the proper circadian rhythms means that the factory is operating optimally. All of the workers and the machines are doing the right job at the right time and at the right place. These rhythms are influenced by many things, including the light environment, the timing and the composition of the foods that you eat, the temperature, and the quality of your sleep. If you don't get bright light in the morning, ideally from sunlight, the proper cellular processes in your body won't begin. your insulin sensitivity tends to be highest earlier in the day. So if you have a high carb meal in the evening, you're not going to be able to handle it that well. If you eat too close to bedtime, you will have dysfunctional digestion of the food because your gut's trying to close down the factory towards the evening. And then eating that food will also impair the processes that are involved in getting your sleep in line. If you're someone who takes sleep aids to help try to get to sleep, well, you're not actually sleeping well. It helps you pass out. It helps you get sedated, but it actually wrecks your sleep architecture. So, I used to take alcohol in the past, try to help calm myself down to go to sleep. But now I know.
You and me both, man.
Now I know that it really messes up sleep architecture, especially REM.
Mm-hmm. And I would just love to hear, because sleep was a big thing I was missing out on for a long time, right? From the age of 18 to 30, I slept between 4 and 6 hours a night. And I talk about that openly, but it became a huge focus at the age of 30. Dr. Pai, what did you think was the most helpful thing for you in terms of optimizing your sleep when you started focusing on it?
And it might be different for different people, but I think I am kind of on the default of being a night owl. If my light environment is not perfect. I know some people can still sleep and wake up at a normal time even when their light environment isn't perfect, but for me, yeah. So getting sunlight and wearing blue blockers has allowed me to be able to wake up in the morning and sleep at a reasonable time in the evening. Before that, I could easily stay up till like 3, 4 a.m. still wired.
Yeah, light is an extremely important cue to our circadian rhythms, right? And so I love that. And just being able to regulate light helps immediately control our sleep-wake cycle. Dr. Sherr, I'm not going to let you get away with not talking here.
What I'm thinking about? I'm thinking about right now is that in medical school, my friends, I never wore this shirt. My friends wore a shirt called "Sleep is for Quitters." That's what they said.
They could have been bankers.
They could have been anybody who thinks that sleep is just not necessary.
Yeah.
But like the opposite is true. And I have 4 kids as well, so I really should have been wearing that shirt for a lot of my years. And just now getting enough sleep and everybody sleeping through the night has been a beautiful thing. But yeah, sleep is a huge, huge deal. And it's actually something that I, like a lot of people, took for granted for many years, up until probably about 2 years ago, really, when all my kids started sleeping through the night. So.
I know I was a close adherent to the eternal words of Nas, which is a rapper, and I'm not sure you should ever take advice from a rap song, but there's a song called, I think, New York State of Mind, which is sleep is the cousin of death. And I quite literally pushed it as far as you possibly could. And so I come to find that sleep is actually a necessity and actually is, think of it as a return on sleep, a return on your investment there.
Hey, Shaker. I have a question real quick for you.
Yeah.
There are a subset of people that don't seem to need as much sleep, like a very, very small subset. Do you know anything about that, or can you comment on that at all, or do you know?
I did, but I don't remember the details off the top of my head. But yeah, I think supposedly this small subset, like if they have this genetic mutation.
Yeah, I think it's genetics, yeah.
That they function well and are healthy with a lower amount of sleep.
I know it's very rare because everybody says, "Oh, I don't need as much sleep. I'm good." You know?
I think it's a very small subset of people that actually have this. So most people who feel that they're functioning on, 5 or 6 hours of sleep are actually wrecking their health.
Right.
If my mind serves me correctly, I think it was the DEC2 gene, because it was the first thing that I looked at when I got my genetics back and said, like, hey, can I sleep less? Of course, this was a number of years back. And I believe the number is somewhere between 3 and 5% of the population has it. So it's a very, and I've never met anybody that's actually had it. There's been a lot of people that claim to have it. But
my father is one of those people. I'm almost
One of those
positive.
people that claims or has.
Oh no, I'm positive he does. But I mean, but I think it's very rare. Not me. I didn't inherit that gene if it's an inheritable type of thing. Anyway.
By the way, I just wanted to add, not sure what your personal records are, and I did not do this intentionally. It was a combination of the light environment and
drugs,
a lot of anxiety, probably being on stimulants.
Yeah.
But my personal record of consecutive hours without sleep is 90 hours.
Wow.
And
that's something to be proud of. Wow.
Towards close to 90, I started feeling like I was hallucinating and dreaming while I was awake. Yeah.
Aren't we all dreaming while awake? Come on, Shaker.
Yeah, this whole reality is an illusion anyway.
Indeed.
That's the joke.
Indeed. Yeah. Anyway.
Guys, can I ask you, could you please recommend any devices for better sleep? Do you know such devices?
Devices for better sleep.
Yeah.
In terms of devices, I think one of the most effective ones, and I'll speak from my own personal perspective here, was the blue light blockers that Shaker mentioned earlier. In fact, just regulation of light in general has been profoundly effective in how I sleep. But Dr. Scott, Dr. Shaker, anything you guys would add to that?
In my house, I don't have blackout shades, but I use a blindfold kind of deal. So making sure that you're blocking out all light when you are sleeping, especially if you're getting up after the sunrise. If you're like a night owl, for example, you go to bed late, you want to make sure that you're not getting woken up too early, unless you want to get out to see the sunrise. And there's reasons for that as well, as Dr. Shaker was talking about. That's probably the major thing for me. I don't typically take a whole lot of supplements to help go to bed, but some people do need them. And I think there's been a couple questions about that in the chat as well. There's also some technologies that can be helpful for me. The other thing that I do is I meditate before I go to bed. And that's a nice way. It depends. If you're one of those people that wakes up in the morning and your mind's racing, that's a great time to meditate as well. But at night, if your mind's racing before you go to bed, it's a nice way to kind of calm the mind, observe your thoughts, and then just let yourself go to bed. So those are a couple of things.
Okay, I thought you will recommend our ring. But okay.
So
it's a nice way to track it.
I can chime in on Oura Ring in general. So if you look at the theme that we're going to get into a little bit later around testing and measurement in general, the Oura Ring is a fantastic tool for measuring and bringing to your own awareness what you're doing or not doing for sleep. It's a great way to develop feedback loops, which help accelerate habit change. So I do love the Oura Ring, and it's one of my favorite. I have one on right now, as does Prince Harry. So I believe it's Prince Harry who wears one quite often. Scott has one as well. Dr. Pai, can we volley over to you? I would love to just jump into exposomics, because this is one that I think a lot of people are not too familiar with. And just wanted to get a sense for the crowd. What is exposomics exactly?
Sure, Boomer. So exposomics, one of the pillars of health optimization medicine, it involves the study of environmental exposures you've had and how this affects health. For example, air and water pollutants, heavy metals, drugs, many chemicals that are classified as endocrine disruptors, and certain exposures can be easily detected, such as your mercury level, your exposure to vehicle exhaust, exposure to styrene, which is in many commercial plastic products. Yeah.
And just because these things are almost ubiquitous now, right? You have everything from, what you just mentioned to glyphosate, etc. There is hope for people that are listening that are saying like, hey, can I even live in a modern world with all of these environmental toxins? There is hope, right?
Yes, because, we should all do our part to try to mitigate our exposure. But if we know our exposure, and like I said, some of these we can measure, we can detect metabolites that show that you've been exposed, then we can have certain strategies besides mitigation to help detoxify you.
So we're going to get into this a little bit after we go through the 7 pillars about just sort of what are some of the things that typically come up and how you may potentially deal with them. But Dr. Sherr, I want to just kind of pick your brain through a number of other of these pillars
we can run through
of health.
fast.
Yeah, let's do it. So let's jump through bioenergetics, because this is another one where most people listening to this. And by the way, I've got the poll results back on the nootropics question, and we'll come to nootropics a little bit later in the session. But so far, we've heard that 36% of people have tried nootropics before, and 64% of people have not. So we may have an exciting discussion at the end of this session as well. But
sounds like it.
Speaking of energy and the energy, battery of our cells, should we talk a little bit about bioenergetics?
Let's talk about those critters. Yeah. So the bioenergetics is a cool topic, and this is something that dovetails in a lot of different ways into the biohacking world. But really what it comes down to is energy production and how we make energy. And so that's pretty simple on one level. We have these batteries in our cell called the mitochondria that basically take the energy that's made in food or from food and then transfer it or create energy for our cellular processes called ATP, the energy currency, using various intermediates along the way to make ATP, to make energy. And so there's lots of steps along the way. But these mitochondria, these organelles, they likely came from a very ancient bacteria. They're called endosymbionts. There is these very, very long time ago, millions of years ago, 2 cells decided to get together and have some fun together. One that was anaerobic, one that did not produce oxygen or need oxygen, but produced energy very ineffectively, but did. And then there was this other type of cell, the mitochondria now that we call it. And now this became part of our cellular structure, or they came together, and this is what actually can use oxygen to make energy a lot more efficiently. And so in our practice and what we do, we're always looking at how we can optimize energy production. And this actually, for me in my personal practice, is very important, because in the work that I do in hyperbaric medicine, what I'm doing is harnessing the power of your cells to make energy more effectively. This is one of the areas that dovetailed extremely effectively in my practice very quickly in what I saw my patients in their outcomes and how they were doing in the chamber. Because if you can't make energy effectively, you cannot live effectively. You can't feel as well as you can. You can't optimize as well as you can. So there's lots of ways to optimize your mitochondrial function. Testing it is really important. So we test the metabolites that are made when you are producing energy from your mitochondria. So we can do this on the cellular level using metabolomic testing. We also know there's lots of other ways to optimize energy production. Some of these are related to chronobiology and other of the pillars that we're going to talk about. Light, water, and magnetism is what I like to talk about. So grounding, the light you're exposed to, the water that you're drinking, all of these things have an effect on your mitochondria and how you can produce energy from your cells.
And perhaps if we have a little bit of time at the end, I'd love to go into some of those habits that people can dig into and start to build, because I know you mentioned grounding, but also there's a number of other things that people can look at in terms of optimizing their mitochondria. Just a reminder to everybody listening to this, there's a Q&A over here. Pop your questions in there and we'll get to those at the end of this discussion, and we'll stay here until we answer all of your questions. So wanted to jump into another topic, another pillar, epigenetics. And earlier, Dr. Pai mentioned metabolomics and also genetics. And I think people are very familiar with the genetics at least, but epigenetics, I know you've had a lot of fun with that one lately. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, so we have a great expert that's helped us with our course. Health Optimization Medicine is a nonprofit, and we have an educational course that we're developing for other practitioners, doctors and non-doctors as well, as Shaker described, the delineation between health optimization medicine and health optimization practice. And Lucia Heronica is an expert in epigenetics, and I helped edit and make our course for that particular topic. Epigenetics is a fantastic and growing field, exponentially growing. Because the idea, as we've been discussing, is not really about your genes. Your genes aren't your destiny. It's how those genes are transformed into metabolites. On the way, we have all these various factors that influence how our genes are expressed. And there are various ways this is controlled. And the control mechanisms now, we understand very well. And these are now being measured both clinically and investigationally in research settings to understand how this can be modulated in ways to make us healthier, and how in various ways it makes us more unhealthy. There's things called methylation and HDACs and small RNAs and all these other kinds of terms that we use that are related to how the DNA itself is regulated. So we can actually measure this in various ways. And actually, we mostly measure it in what actually happens in the metabolomic level. But we now understand that there's various things that we can do that change our epigenetics and modulate them in a positive way. And actually, we can measure, using epigenetics, your biologic age versus your chronologic age now. There's a lot of work that was done by a guy named Steve Horvath called the Horvath clock, which is very interesting now because it's now coming into the world where we can actually test our ages, our age, and know how old we are, not only chronologically, biologically as well. And we know that there's other measures for this as well. There's telomere age, and there's other ways of determining this, but we actually think this is probably one of the best ways to know how old you truly are cellularly. So epigenetics is this fantastic field that really is just getting off the ground, but it's not even just happening in the biohacking world. I mean, you exercise, you improve your epigenetics, but we also see it happening in specialties that are very, very more aligned in the conventional world now, using epigenetics as a way to treat cancer and diabetes and heart disease. And so it's really interesting how it's all kind of coming together.
Let's jump through the next one, which is the gut immune system. And another one which you spend quite a lot of time with, and is one that has somewhat of a controversy around it, just in terms of the testing thereof. But you look at the gut immune system, and I would love to hear just sort of what insights, because obviously it's very, very important. It's been called the second brain, etc. But what insights can we glean from the gut immune system, and why is it important for health optimization medicine practice?
Yeah, it's a big question. But I think to make it as simple as possible, your shit is important.
Forewarning everybody, we are going to curse today. Like I said, it's a fun bunch, but
yeah. So the gut it's the whole thing, right? It's everything from your mouth down to the end where things come out. And each aspect of our gut immune system, or our gut, is extremely important to our health. And where we mostly focus on, although there's various areas that we can focus on in health optimization medicine, is your colon and your small intestine and your stomach, your GI system. So if you're not digesting food well, that's going to be a problem. Not only that you're not getting your vitamins, minerals, and nutrients, but those undigested products might cause issues with bacterial overgrowth or pathogens or other aspects of changing how your body regulates the inside and the outside of your gut lumen. Or basically, you can think of the gut as being sort of external. Like it's actually cordoned off from the rest of your body, because we eat and ingest a lot of things that we should not have in our system. So the gut integrity is extremely important. And so what it comes down to it is that gut integrity is a sign of overall health. It's an area where you make lots of your vitamins, your minerals, where you make active forms of your vitamins, your minerals, you're making neurotransmitters, and you actually make lots of the health-related molecules that sustain our system. So without a good functioning gut, you are going to have deterioration in your immune system, your brain function, your ability to process information, and various other aspects of your system. And remember, this is not just bacteria. We're talking about bacteria, viruses, fungus. This all works together in a very significant network effect that not only networks with our system, but actually networks with each other, and through different types of, actually through inter-kingdom crosstalk as well. So without having a good functioning gut, you will not be healthy, is the short answer.
And when you say gut integrity, what we're talking about here is that also trendy term leaky gut, or are we talking about something else? What exactly constitutes gut integrity there?
Yeah, so leaky gut is one of the aspects. It's kind of a big term of what we mean by that is you don't have good gut integrity. Basically, that things that are coming into the cells shouldn't be coming into the body are in forms, or actually the things themselves should not be coming in, but the colon wall is actually just one cell thick, and then it's covered in mucus. And if you have any lack of integrity there, you are going to get things in there that are going to cause inflammation, cause immune system deregulation, and everything along the way. So when we talk about gut integrity, we're mostly talking about the aspects of leaky gut that most people understand, but there's lots of nuances along the way. It's not just, what we think of as leaky gut, that, you have like these huge passageways that are things are like, I don't know what people are thinking about when they think of leaky gut, but it can be very nuanced. It doesn't have to be that you have all these symptoms all the time. And that's one of the aspects of what we do, is that we're not necessarily looking for symptom management here. We're looking at things that are sort of more indolent or more under the radar, subtle, that we can help optimize over the long term, that you may actually benefit from, that you may not even realize are going on. And some people have overt symptoms, absolutely, but a lot of people have these signs of leaky gut, or signs of just lack of gut integrity that's just starting, that if you can address early, can be significant benefit.
Fascinating, actually. We're going to come back to that leaky gut concept here a little bit as we go into how you actually test these different parameters. But evolutionary medicine is something, or the last pillar that we're going to touch on today. And so would love to hear your thoughts as to why, evolutionary medicine or evolutionary biology is a part of this framework.
So we all came from somebody and somewhere, and we have genes that and a biology that reflects that, in the sense of where we came from can delineate where or what kinds of exposures we would have had thousands of years ago. And this is very helpful. So if you grew up in India, or you grew up in North America, if you're a Native American, or if you grew up in European climates, your genetics, your evolutionary biology is different. And the idea of evolutionary biology is that we all have an evolutionary perspective on where we are now. And that's a big part of what we do in health optimization medicine. And there's lots of interesting trade-offs that happen with evolutionary biology. Things that help us when we're younger, that actually can be a detriment when we're older. And there's these really interesting terms. One of them is called antagonistic pleiotropy, which is a really cool term, a very, very difficult term to say, but like the idea that you have these aspects of our biology that really work well for procreating, for example, but are very, very poor as far as evolutionarily for us when we're 60 years old. And so we look at some of these in health optimization medicine to understand that our goal here is not longevity. Okay, it's not lifespan. Our goal here is health span. The idea of creating as many good years on this planet in this dimension as possible, and then dying, whenever that is. Could it be 150? Sure. But that's not really my marker here. Like a lot of people in this world, our marker in health optimization medicine is that health span marker. So optimizing our system, and this is what we're going to be talking about with testing, to somebody that's in their optimal state of health. And that typically is somebody between 20 and 30 years of age. That's when we have the most resilience. That's when we have the most optimized ability to fight the wars, to make babies, and to make sure that the next generations are coming alongside of us, so that we continue the species, the human race, this particular human race. So that's really what evolutionary biology is looking at, is some of those trade-offs and some of those ideas of where our biology came from and how we can understand where we need to optimize in the modern world.
And thank you to everybody here listening so far. And I would love to hear from the people listening, because nobody in the chat has mentioned that they're living in Sweden right now. So I imagine that a lot of us are in some sort of shelter in place or lockdown situation. What I'd love to hear from people in the chat at this moment is, what sort of COVID habits have you developed as a result? That could be including the COVID-15, which is very different from the COVID-19, so putting on weight, so to speak. But
I haven't heard that. I like it.
Trademark. Actually, I probably stole it from somebody else, so
That's
it's
okay.
okay.
Everything's stolen.
Yeah, exactly. So we've covered the 7 pillars of health optimization, medicine, and practice. And if you lay those out beside themselves, you can very clearly see that it is a great framework for how to evaluate your biohacking. We have elements of nutrition in biohacking. We have elements of technology. We have different elements regarding sleep, as we've discussed. And I think there's a few questions in the Q&A around sleep that we'll come back to later. But the question we're going to come to now is, how do you get all of this done? How do you evaluate and get this data? And I think it's worth spending a moment on the testing and what we can see as a result of the testing. So the basic level testing, and all of the home hope practitioners do this differently, but the basic level of testing is blood, urine, and stool. And what we're doing there is measuring metabolites. We're testing the health of that gut immune system that you mentioned. We're testing for things like food sensitivities and whether or not they're causing low-grade inflammation in your body. And we're also looking at metabolites for various vitamin, mineral, and cofactors in different reactions within that body, things contributing to that bioenergetic subject that we talked about earlier. And so once you have all of that information, it's a very, very powerful tool. And just to go back to when I started in the biohacking, it was just sort of like, oh my God, holy shit, there's a bunch of stuff in the world. I'm just going to start buying different things and trying them because Tim Ferriss or whomever mentioned that it was a good idea. That can be very, very painful and very, very costly. So by going through this process and determining, what exactly your body needs and what exactly you're going through right now in this moment, because of the metabolome, because we're testing the metabolome, can be very, very effective and allow you to have a much more targeted approach to your biohacking. But once we get those results back, Shaker, you mentioned this earlier, or Dr. Pai, you mentioned this earlier, this concept of networks and optimizing on networks. And this is something that I find fascinating, right? And the interrelationships, and given everything that's going on in the world right now, there's a lot of discussion as to what's the pill for the ill, et cetera, et cetera. But what people don't really seem to account for is networks. Do you mind just walking us through what are networks in the relationship to getting those test results back and how we can use them to optimize ourselves?
Yeah, thanks for bringing this up, Boomer. It's a really important topic. A lot of the nutrients in our body are networked together. So, it's really common for people to be supplementing with vitamin D right now. Maybe a lot of people in the audience are. But I don't know how many of them are thinking about how vitamin D is linked with vitamin A and vitamin K. If one supplements with vitamin D and they don't think about vitamin K2, it can potentially lead to calcification in the wrong places. You can get soft tissue calcification. If vitamin A is very helpful for immunity, but if you're taking vitamin A and you're not thinking about vitamin D, it could potentially increase your risk of osteoporosis. Another example involves antioxidants. I'm sure there are people who are watching who are taking some antioxidants or maybe one. It's all a network, and the way, how do antioxidants even function? They donate an electron to something that's an oxidant, usually a free radical. And in the process of doing that, it itself becomes oxidized and becomes a reactive species. So something else has to recycle it. And so for vitamin E, it works at the plasma membranes. When it does its job and it becomes oxidized, vitamin C comes in and recycles the vitamin E. But then what recycles the vitamin C? It's glutathione. And then what involves recycling of the glutathione? It's certain B vitamins like B1, B2, B3, and the system of energy metabolism. So you have to think about all of these things together.
And I'll invite Dr. Sherr to also chime in on this. But one of the things that our mentor always talks about is the idea of hormone range optimization, or just taking things back to the ages of 21 to 30. Can we talk about why that is important and why we focus on that age group?
Are you asking me or are you asking Shake?
We can throw it out to both of you, whoever wants to chime in first.
I'll let Shaker take it. You're on mute.
We got to unmute Shaker.
Yeah. I mean, 21 through 30 is kind of our peak biologic age. So I think that's why the focus tends to be at that age range.
Suffice to say, go ahead, Dr. Sherr.
No, I was going to mention, because I know Boomer, you and I have talked about this, of course, and is that when you're looking at the ranges that you normally would get when you go to like the lab, for example, right? So if you go to your normal lab and you get your thyroid checked, you get any hormones checked, really, they're not giving you an average for even your age. They're giving you an average from somebody that could be as young as 12 or younger and to as high as 95 years old. And they take an average TSH, average thyroid level, average testosterone level. Although testosterone is a little bit different, but the other ones for the most part are, especially not the sex hormones, are given in ranges that are extremely, extremely wide. So you're getting an average of, 70 years of thyroid hormones. So what we are looking to do really is let's compress that range and make it a range that would be optimal for somebody that wants to live with the most energy, with the most sustainability, with the most resilience. And that, again, is that in that age group between 21 and 30 years of age.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me that you get these people going and they're doing the right things or trying to do the right things, getting their thyroid checked, and they're getting their results back and they're seeing it within a reference range. But the relevance of a 70-year-old person's TSH number to my TSH number as a 34-year-old, it just seems like there's a disconnect there. And what I love about this process of network range optimization is that we're looking at really bringing you back to where you're best biologically, but also bringing it more relevant to you, because there's a whole lot of that reference range data that is just not relevant to you specifically. But wanted to introduce the second question now, because I remember everybody in the chat, and I see we have some good Q&A going here for a little bit later. But the second question is around methylene blue. So Mick, can I get your help on just polling the attendees about whether or not they've tried methylene blue? All right, so you guys will see that pop up now if you can answer. Again, simple yes, no question. We want to have it interactive, fun, etc., but also make it a little bit easy for you guys because it is the weekend. It's Saturday morning in the United States, and some people are watching Cartoon Network right now. But also some people are tuning in and really learning some good stuff here. So let's jump into the results that we've seen from this. And I would just love, Dr. Pai, if you don't mind, your personal story strikes me as extremely, extremely interesting. And would love to hear a little bit more about, since you've gone through this health optimization testing, what has come within your life, if you're willing to share it. Otherwise, whatever you're willing to share about your clients as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is my N=1. It's an anecdote. And the process started before health optimization medicine, but like continued and, maybe it's not obvious, but I used to struggle a lot with being overweight, and I've had severe depression and anxiety issues and severe ADHD. And even in my late 20s, I'm 35 right now, even in my late 20s, I had erectile dysfunction. I used to need multiple pharmaceutical agents for the depression, anxiety, and ADD. And I even was taking Viagra. Okay. But I'm on no pharmaceutical agents to manage any of my symptoms. So I didn't know that it was possible to be alive in this world without depression. I mean, I get mood swings, and perhaps sometimes they're more pronounced than someone who doesn't have a history of depression, but it's very easy to just get back on track.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. That's honestly something I didn't know about you, and it's an extremely vulnerable position to get in. But thank you for sharing. Again, I'll dovetail or kind of piggyback on the end of one, and I'll take a different aspect than I normally do with this, because if you want my personal story, it's out there enough. But going back to this idea of a framework for biohacking, when I started taking health seriously and going beyond just diet, exercise, the Huffington Post, and whatever the hell they were saying, I was spending a lot of money on just whatever the latest guru was saying was a good thing to try. You know, I'd have Amazon deliveries from random places, or from random supplement companies. I would have random technologies. You can probably see some of them in the back of my room here, but you'd have random technologies show up, and there wasn't really a framework to test whether or not it was good or bad for me, or, you know, I was trying my best with the Oura Ring and the quantified self data and all of those things, but there wasn't really a framework to really test internally what was going on. And so Dr. Scott introduced me to Dr. Ted, who we've alluded to many, many times on this webinar. And I was at the time trying to figure out how to build an operating model for human performance. Yes, I'm an Excel nerd and come from banking, and so operating models made sense to me, and I was just trying to figure out in Excel how to do it. And Dr. Ted and I were, this is a podcast episode actually, we were scheduled to speak for 45 minutes, and we ended up talking for about 3.5 hours. If you know him, he's extremely generous with his time. But we ended up talking about for 3.5 hours, and at the end I was like, holy shit, somebody has figured it out. And since then, it's allowed me to just very elegantly lay out why I'm doing something and how to collect feedback on it, and also how to test whether or not it's working. And so that's really my own N of one experience with this. But Dr. Sherr, would love to hear what you've seen with your patients and clients in interacting in this framework.
Mm. I apologize if my internet seems unstable. You'd think in Silicon Valley it wouldn't be.
So the irony.
Yeah, I know. So just let me know. But so my experience, I think, starts off as I was alluding to in the beginning, as a hyperbaric physician. So I am an internal medicine doc, but I grew up very out of the box as the son of a chiropractor. So very much alternative medicine was how and all that I knew until I went to medical school. I was always looking for a framework, even going through medical school, as to how I could sort of dovetail these things, you know, bring them together in some idealistic, optimistic way, where it didn't really exist at the time. And functional medicine didn't exist really. Integrative medicine wasn't a term. And so I gravitated towards hyperbaric medicine because it was this therapy that was very simple. And I'm relatively a simple guy here. I like oxygen. Pressure sounded cool. We all need oxygen. Pressure is this really cool stimulus that combines with oxygen to make more energy at the cellular level. And I was having a good time understanding this and then starting to practice in it. But I was realizing that I was missing something. I was missing like some sort of basic foundation. And I didn't want to do functional medicine. I knew all about it. I had friends that were going into it, but it seemed unwieldy to me. There was lots of aspects to it. It was very disease focused. It was very sort of root cause focused, which I think is important, but it wasn't for me. And when I met Dr. Ted, and I was walking with him about 3.5 years ago in Chinatown in LA, and I asked him, you know, if you're this brilliant kind of guy, and I think, am I frozen? Am I still going?
No, you're still going.
I just want to make sure. I thought Shaker wasn't moving, so I wasn't sure if I was. So just want to make sure. I've frozen twice so far. So I was walking with him down in Chinatown, and when you meet somebody like him who's brilliant, you ask, you know, what gets you up in the morning every day as this brilliant guy who could do anything he wants? And he said, you know, Scott, all I want to do is raise the vibratory frequency of the planet through health, and I think I found the framework to do it. And that obviously was extremely exciting, because as soon as I knew there was a framework that was health focused, that wasn't going to focus on disease and you can set that aside and then just focus on health, that was much more of kind of in my wheelhouse of how I grew up and what I understood as health as to be. It wasn't about just always looking at root causes. It was looking at this bigger picture. And so, and I understood very quickly with my clients and with myself, if you optimized cellular energy production, you were going to make treatment in a chamber more efficient, faster, and better. So that was the simple aspects. And then as I've sort of evolved my practice, part of it is on that hyperbaric side still, and health optimization medicine portion together. But some patients or some clients, we're just using health optimization and that framework, health optimization medicine. And I've seen some fantastic things happen. I mean, very simple things make huge differences. And that's also important for people to know. As soon as you can test some of your food sensitivities and intolerances, you take those out of your diet for a couple weeks or a couple months, and then you stop having reflux all night. You stop having weight gain. And then these are not things that we ever say these are what we call our beneficial side effects to what we do. We are not looking to treat you for your symptoms or your root causes. But when you optimize the cellular function, you optimize your gut function, you have lots of good beneficial side effects that we have no claims that we're going to make. But this is what I've seen: resilience, energy, immune system function improvements, weight loss, and all those kinds of other things that we want, or weight gain if you want that too. So again, if you optimize your system, you will be able to respond better to whatever you'd like to respond to, whatever biohacks you want to try. And that's where a lot of the work that you do, Boomer, and I sort of, and as well as Shaker, and I'm sure other people on this call kind of bring together, because we have about 4 of those modules that are done, and we should have hopefully the rest, the 3 that are remaining, done very soon. Shaker and Boomer, you got to get your asses in gear, but that's okay. That's enough. They're working on chronobiology, but we are really excited because can be more resilient when it comes to the craziness that is going to happen externally and internally inside of us, that we do have control over and we don't, most of it which we don't. So, but we do have control over our own biology and how we can measure and optimize to that targeted level, like Shaker was talking about. We can target the antioxidants you need. You can target the minerals you need. You can target the vitamins that you need and the supplements you need to optimize your gut. And by doing that, we can make these superhumans, kind of, in the sense of the super optimized people, and the sense that you don't have to worry as much about that pandemic. Yes, you have to take the regular precautions and everything else, but that's okay. You're going to be okay. But I like having the ability to tell people now in this new world, well, maybe you should think about it, optimizing yourself before the next one happens. We'll do our best now, but let's do what we can so that you now know that there are ways that you can optimize before something happens.
And just for those interested in everything that Scott and what we've talked about today, and we still have more to talk about here, homehope.org, there is a free, if you just drop your email in there is a free introductory module that you can check out there. And I encourage everybody to check it out because Dr. Ted, actually, this is a guest lecture that he did where people paid a heck of a lot of money to attend, but also it walks through this framework in a little bit more detail than what we've gotten into today. But you alluded to it earlier, Scott, and your tongue alludes to it more, and everyone here is curious as to why your tongue is blue. Before we get into that, the results on have you tried Methylene Blue, by the way, are 17% of the audience has tried Methylene Blue. So 17% of you may be in the know as to what we're going to talk about next. But you mentioned that there is a for-profit arm of the Home Hope Association, which helps support the nonprofit. Can we talk a little bit about prescriptions and specifically, I have to, everybody wants to know why the hell your tongue's blue.
Yeah. So the beautiful thing about what we do is that we like to have a lot of fun along the way. this is not just about being serious and changing the world, and like we have these sort of like high-minded, we do, but we also like to have fun along the way. If it's not fun, then it's not worth it, right? So it's not always fun in the midst of things. And when you have a 2.5-year-old that can't get to the bathroom in time, like that's not fun all the time. But on some level, when he says, "Daddy, can you read to me before I go to bed?" like that's fun, right? There's always sort of like trade-offs here. And in health optimization medicine practice, our association, our nonprofit, we have a for-profit company that runs alongside of it. That's called Smarter, Not Harder. And this has nothing to do with erections, although maybe at some point, not right now. Our first product line is a product line that has a specific formula called a troche. A troche is a sublingual lozenge, but it's a buccal lozenge, really. Basically, it stays in your mouth and you let it dissolve in one place. It's not something that you kind of move around too much most of the time. We call that full Smurf. In a minute, you'll understand why. This particular product, our first product, is one that helps with brain function called blue carotene. And the nice thing about what we're doing here is it's not in a bubble, it's not in a vacuum. We're using these particular products, this first nootropic. Our nootropic product is our first in this line that is looking to address the symptomatic bottlenecks people have on their path to optimal health that we see in health optimization medicine and practice. So if you are looking to optimize your health, but you're having some challenges, you want good brain function to be able to help you do that and help you get through some of those challenges you might have along the way. If you're already optimized, then it's much easier to even actually see the benefits of nootropics even more so. Now, I know Shaker, and he has experience, which is important, about how stimulants, or how nootropics, I should say, can really help if you're having real challenges with brain function at times. And that's really important too. But what this product line is looking to do is to address those symptomatic bottlenecks along the way to your optimized health state. So this particular one turns your tongue blue like that because it has something in it called methylene blue. It also has 3 other active ingredients: caffeine, nicotine, and hemp crystals. So those 4 together in precision dosed pharmaceutical grade products in combination is also working together to optimize brain function. So that's what this one is all about. And we have more coming that are going to be addressing some of those other symptomatic bottlenecks along the way.
And so several of the benefits that I've received from this, you hop off a plane, and this actually happened to me earlier this year when we all met at Metabolic Health Summit, was you hop off the plane from Amsterdam to LA, and that's a 9-hour time change. And you need to have some sort of verbal fluency because I'm having conversations with the smart people that you see here before you today. Blue carotene itself was very, very helpful in terms of verbal fluency. Maybe Scott and Shaker didn't notice it, but it was very, very helpful for me in terms of being able to speak after all of that jet lag.
I didn't hear you stuttering, so you were doing a good job.
Yeah, so that's very helpful, as well as short-term memory, and of course the golden ticket these days, given all of the information and shit we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, focus. And so that I've found to be an extremely, extremely effective nootropic for myself in my own life. But with that, I think just reiterating to people here before we turn it over to Q&A, at homehope.org, you can check out that free lecture that Dr. Ted gave, and you'll be able to find out more information about the 7 different pillars, as well as the health optimization medicine and practice course there, of course. But I think it's time for a little Q&A, guys. What do you say?
Oh, Boomer, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind talking about, because I know you've done a lot of the Q&A and doing the emceeing, but about methylene blue a little bit, and about some of the ingredients that are in this. I know that you're very familiar with them from the biohacking world. So do you want to chat about a little bit of the ingredients?
Yeah, sure. Let's volley back and forth on these different ingredients, right?
Sounds
so
good.
There's methylene blue, hemp crystals, which you mentioned, caffeine, and nicotine. I'm going to leave the nicotine one for you. But methylene blue, as you said, dyes your tongue blue, but also has been shown to well, it contributes as an electron donor to your mitochondria, but also looking at, there's interesting studies around this, everything from...
Yeah, Shaker can chime in here too, by the way.
Yeah, Shaker, I would love for you to chime in just a little bit here as to the studies on methylene blue are fascinating to me, because it was one of the first chemicals that or I guess drugs that we used for malaria, even way back in, I think it was 1890, but correct me if I'm wrong there. But it's had a history as an antifungal and potentially an antiviral, but also it's had some impacts as to reducing the effects of early onset Alzheimer's. So Shaker, please add to what I'm missing when it comes to methylene blue, but this is such a fascinating topic for me.
Yeah, it, I think, is the oldest pharmaceutical agent in the United States.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was discovered in the late 1800s, first used in textiles, I believe. And then they discovered it had a bunch of different anti-infective properties. And then in the 20th century, they realized that it had implications for cellular metabolism. So it participates to produce, it leads to increased energy production in the cell. And then also they discovered it has antioxidant properties. And then fast forward to, I think within the past couple decades, they've found out through, I think, different levels of organisms that it improves different aspects of cognitive function. I believe there's one human study so far that tested short-term memory, and it seemed to have improved that. I think that's what the study.
There's some research that's going on in Alzheimer's disease as well, and some models of Alzheimer's disease, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. Yeah, the human studies are coming. The nice thing about methylene blue is it's having a resurgence. Yeah. There's much more interest in it because of pandemic types of reasons, because it does have antiviral qualities, and it's been used in the past in combination with things like UV light as well to help kill viruses. No, we're not claiming that that our product does this, by the way, but it's interesting that methylene blue is now having this resurgence, and it's because it's been around for over like 150 years or more now. Mm-hmm. And it's just one of the ingredients we have in our formula, but it's probably the most interesting because it's really having a resurgence and having its day, which is unusual for something that's been around so long. But go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the important thing is that what the dose is of the methylene blue, and to make sure that you're not taking other medications that could lead to consequences.
Or having it from a fish tank as well.
Yeah, the quality. So the quality of it really matters. There's the lowest grade, which is industrial grade, and then step up is, I believe, chemical grade, and then a step up from that is pharmaceutical grade, which is the best. Also,
that's what we have. Yeah, in our product.
Yeah.
Right,
So pharmaceutical grade methylene blue is what's in blue canazine. The other one that there's three more that we've mentioned. Caffeine, I think, is something that everyone is relatively familiar with. In fact, if you're in the chat and you don't drink any sort of caffeinated beverage, we'd love to hear from you. But caffeine is a stimulant that has been very, very effective in terms of improving cognition. Hemp crystals and nicotine, I think, deserve a little bit more attention. But let's double click on nicotine, because I think it's a little bit misunderstood by the population. And so, Dr. Sherr, you and I have had a conversation around this quite recently, actually. Nicotine.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Why should people be afraid or not be afraid of it?
Well, nicotine has definitely gotten a bad rap, and deservingly so on some level, because it is one of the addictive components of cigarette smoking or vaping, for example. But nicotine on its own is not nearly as addictive as when it's combined with additives that you find in.
Oh, did we lose Scott there a little bit? I think Scott's going to come back here in a second, but Dr. Pai, are you able to just comment a little bit in terms of nicotine?
Yeah, I mean, I think with what Scott is saying, nicotine is addictive, but when it's in the tobacco form, it's with all the other stuff in there, it's more addictive. And then also when it's smoked or vaped, it's even more addictive because when you inhale something, it gets to the brain the fastest, and that leads to the highest chance of getting addicted to something. Yeah.
Amazing. Dr. Sherr, I know you dropped off there just for a second. The Silicon Valley internet is one of the great ironies of this time. But
I'm glad you guys are there to take it over.
we had some fun on nicotine. The last one is hemp crystals, and I would love to just.
Can I add one more comment on the nicotine?
Please do.
Just, I mean, it just brings up like an extra point that just because something is addictive, does that mean you shouldn't take it? Or like it's not good for you? There have been studies that show nicotine is beneficial in certain ways.
Yeah, it's been studied in Alzheimer's as well as something that can help with cognitive function. Did you talk? I don't know if you guys talked about the formulation that we have is like it's a buccal troche, right? So the nicotine's you're not getting hit with it immediately. You're getting a slow release of nicotine over 15 to 30 minutes, and so it's a much less possibility for addiction as a result of that if you follow our prescribed amount per day maximum, 4 troches a day max kind of thing.
Exactly. And blue carotene has this nice, it doesn't launch you into outer space to the point where like if you overdo the caffeine, which I'm sure many of the people listening to this have, if you overdo the caffeine, you get the jitters, right? And with blue carotene, there's this sort of gradual rise, and then you have this amazing amounts of focus, verbal fluency, things that I alluded to earlier. But it's not like you're off in outer space. And part of the reason for that is the hemp crystals. And so, Scott, if you don't mind, I'd just love, right before we turn it over to Q&A, to talk a little bit about those hemp crystals.
Yeah, hemp crystals beatifically derived, as we like to say. But it's being used in a lot of different products these days for a lot of different reasons. But for the reasons in this particular product is that they help with, they're neuroprotective, basically. And they also allow there to be sort of an anxiolytic or decreased sort of anxiety proportion of this. And so what can sometimes happen with caffeine and nicotine especially is it can give you this quick edge where you feel like this sudden rise, if anybody who's tried these on their own, or if you're very sensitive to caffeine, you know what I'm talking about. And it can be almost leading to like to jitters and sort of edginess kind of feeling. But with the hemp crystals, this rounds it out. So you don't have that immediate jolt, and it kind of gives you more of an on-ramping, as I like to think about it. And it's nice because it's also neuroprotective, as I said. And there's also, I think as a result of having it in there, there's really no withdrawal effect as well. So you don't feel when you finish your limitless 3 hours that you're all of a sudden like dead and you can't think and that your mind is blown. And I know some other nootropics give you that sort of that rebound effect. Ours doesn't do that. And it's a nice addition, I think, to hemp crystals to also help with that as well.
Thank you for walking through that. And again, I've tried a number of nootropics out there, and that come down can be pretty brutal, and it can lead into the next day. And that's something that you don't get with this. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Anything we should add before we turn things over to the Q&A?
Good. No, I think we wrapped it. I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah. So let's move over to the Q&A. I know we've been typing back and forth with people over the course of this conversation, but I would love to just address, I believe we have 9 total questions. For those still in attendance listening to this, if you can pop your questions into the Q&A, we're going to get to them now. But there seems to be a common theme, or at least among a couple of the questions, around sleep. And just let's talk about just the effectiveness of supplements on sleep. Melatonin's often mentioned, but when we look at supplements regarding improving sleep, how, or for whatever we can say, how do you guys look at that for your clients? Maybe Dr. Pai, if you can chime in there.
I I mean, from my perspective, I think the whole health optimization medicine thing with looking at the whole nutrient network is important, and it affects all of it. But if, I mean, it seems like a lot of people feel magnesium helps specifically. Also, there have been some studies that show that glycine could help with sleep. Melatonin is helpful, but should only be used short term. Yeah.
Awesome.
I've also heard phosphatidylserine could be helpful. But yeah, I think the major thing is to avoid eating right before bed, avoid alcohol in the evening, avoid any kind of prescription or pharmaceutical agent is going to wreck your sleep, even if it helps you pass out. So any of the antihistamines like Benadryl, yeah. I don't know. I hope no one's using Ambien because.
And please seek the advice of your doctor if you are. But Dr. Scott, this one actually came into you about hyperbaric oxygen, and I would love to just hear your thoughts around this, just given it's your field of expertise, right? So do you think hyperbaric oxygen or hyperbaric therapy or other oxygen therapies would be effective in dealing with coronavirus? You've had a number of posts around this lately, and so I think it's worth addressing for the crowd.
Yeah, it's definitely a hot topic, obviously, for obvious reasons. So hyperbaric therapy has been around a long time, and really what it does is help oxygenate the system. So one of the areas that's been very interesting looking at the evolution of our understanding of coronavirus is that it's causing significant hypoxia or low oxygen states. And the question now becomes why that's happening. There's some evidence that it's related to red blood cell destruction in the sense of the red blood cells not being able to carry hemoglobin as they typically are, offloading iron, which is something that's in the hemoglobin molecule as well, and making this huge inflammatory reaction. So the questions are around, can hyperbaric therapy, number one, increase oxygenation or improve oxygenation when you're having a difficult time getting oxygen into the system? And the actual mechanism of getting oxygen into the system in a hyperbaric chamber is by diffusing oxygen into the plasma or the liquid of our blood. And the red blood cells, if there is availability for oxygen to hop on, it will. But in general, the liquid or the plasma of our blood has very little oxygen in it at sea level. And so what's been happening a little bit in China, they've done a little bit of research here. There's a new study that's happening in New York that's getting up and going. And there are actually some hospitals that are just kind of doing some cowboy medicine, which I'm totally excited about. These hospitals never do this kind of stuff. They don't have a choice this time around. But they're doing a number of different things to simulate a hyperbaric environment. Some are actually putting people in chambers. There's actually these hoods that they're using now that go on your head and they sort of seal you up, and then they blow infused oxygen in there with pressure as well, although mild hyperbaric pressure it would be. So the idea is, can it help oxygenate the body when a person's on the path of being on a ventilator, which if you go on a ventilator, you have a very high risk of not coming off of it or not surviving, is really what it comes down to. I mean, the vast majority of people do not require this, but the people that are hospitalized and then become hypoxic or low oxygen, like their oxygen levels don't stay up, those people are at higher risk, of course. So there's some interesting things that have been happening in the news. They were looking at repurposing airplanes to be hyperbaric chambers because they're all grounded right now, or a lot of them are, which is very interesting. If you've ever been in an airplane before, it's actually a hypoxic environment. It's a low oxygen environment, pressurized to 8,000 feet above the sea. That's so it stays lighter and that you can fly. And also, it's sort of like some of the Dreamliners are 6,000 feet, but in general, they don't think it's unhealthy for you to be up there, but we know it's not very healthy to be in a low oxygen environment. This is one of the reasons why you have a higher risk of infections and jet lag, not only just changing your circadian rhythms and screwing up your gut bacteria that think it's a different time zone, but also because it's this low oxygen environment. So what they're looking to do is just change how it pressurizes is actually in the cabin and make it a hyperbaric environment. Now you couldn't fly with it like this, but They could be grounded and be hyperbaric environments. So it's very interesting. We know that there's also the potential that hyperbaric therapy is a significant anti-inflammatory, so it could help with the anti-inflammatory or the inflammatory response. And finally, we think it's an anti-infective, especially at very, very deep pressures, for virus, but we don't know for sure. But again, all this sort of in the context of understanding what's happening at the cellular level, hopefully, because if you can optimize the cellular level, just like Sherr was saying for optimizing sleep, if you're not optimizing that level, anything that we do is not going to be as effective. It's kind of like borrowing money from a bank that you don't have any in. You can only borrow on credit for a certain amount of time before you default. And that's what's happening in some patients now. I think the highest risk you have of getting sick with COVID-19 is if you're obese, right? Obesity seems to be like the biggest risk factor. Mm-hmm. So again, this is the metabolic syndrome, right? So again, it's all about this foundational work. You can't look at this in a silo. I mean, hyperbaric therapy is a great technology, and I think we're going to use it more. But I guess my emphasis here, just like Sherr's, if you're trying to optimize your sleep, is optimize your vitamins, your minerals, your nutrients, antioxidants, and target all that stuff first if you can, because then you're going to have a lot better outcome going forward.
Mm-hmm. Next question is from Matthew, and Matthew, thank you for posting this here. Thank you so much, Scott and Sherr. Can you speak about some of the clinical benefits you've seen in practice with the home hope approach to optimizing your metabolome? We hinted on this a little bit earlier, but if we can just revisit just sort of high level, what are some of the clinical benefits or outcomes that you've seen in person?
So as I was discussing before, we don't make any claims, right? The idea is that we're optimizing cellular function. We are detecting and correcting imbalances at that level. However, what typically happens as a result of that is, oh, you've spotlighted me for the video. I don't know how that works. Okay, I'm spotlighted. Okay. So what typically happens when we do that, when we optimize cellular level function, is that you see sort of on the macro scale, people just feel better, and they feel better in lots of different ways. It could be digestive qualities get better. They could be energy better as far as how they feel on a day-to-day basis, dips and valleys, or valleys and peaks kinds of things. Also from a mood and stability from a psychologic perspective, even though that's not our focus in what we do see people, kind of like Sherr was mentioning before, you do have this ability to sort of regulate, you feel more regulated in your moods and and how you interact with the world in lots of different psychological ways. So these are some of the benefits that I've seen in my clients. I mean, sometimes it could be very, very quick in the sense that you take out one food and all of a sudden you feel amazingly better. But often what we're doing is a long-term play, and that's important too. We're not looking at the benefit for tomorrow. We're looking at the benefit for the rest of your life over the long term. And this is something I'm very emphatic about with my clients, is that this is not something that tomorrow you are likely going to feel like you've done a 180. It's going to be something that over the long term, you are going to feel changes. But what Dr. Ted likes to say, and I think it's important, is like, and other people say it too, you took 40 years to get to the way you are. You can't expect that tomorrow you're going to feel that we can reverse all of those 40 years, right? If you were eating burgers and hot dogs and sleeping 4 hours a day, even if you've just been optimizing your health for a couple years, you can't expect that overnight you're going to have these huge shifts. It does take time. That's why when we do the testing, the blood, urine, and stool, we don't often repeat it for 6 months, sometimes 3 months for some of the testing, but at the very earliest 3 months, but really at 6 months is when you can see these huge shifts that are happening that we're looking to optimize and target. So I have to be very emphatic with my clients that this is a long-term play. This is not something that tomorrow you're going to feel this gigantic shift. And that's why we have things like nootropics and other supplements that we are creating, that other companies have, that we recommend, that help along that way so that you have some of those sort of more immediate benefits.
Mm-hmm. Couple questions here from Peter Castellano, and I'm going to try and combine your questions, Peter, just in the interest of time. But health optimization, biohacking, health optimization and the tracking of metabolites. Who are the people that sort of implement this in terms of, are they doctors? Are they also practitioners? Are they coaches? And I think, Peter, just to answer your question right there, it's a combination of both. Remember, it's health optimization, medicine, and practice. Both Dr. Pai and Dr. Sherr are physicians, but I myself am a health optimization practitioner, meaning a coach. And so there are there are people from both sides of the spectrum that are involved in that health optimization medicine and practice. Now, the second one I want to talk about is just sort of the jobs in this area outside of being a doctor. So we do have people that come from all walks of life, right? We have naturopaths and others, but do you guys mind just talking a little bit about some of the different varieties of people that we've seen come through the course so far?
I guess I can take that. So what I think is really important to emphasize is that doctors are bottlenecks too. There's not that many of us. And there's very few of us, even within the field, that even talk about health in any real way. And I talk out of both sides of my mouth. I am a conventional doctor. Dr. Sherr and I both work as conventional physicians. So we understand how difficult it is to have this conversation with physicians, our colleagues. It's been interesting, as I was alluding to with the pandemic, because now doctors are like, you want to use zinc? Let's use zinc. I'm like, fantastic, right? But before that, they're like, well, where's the randomized control study? Where's the 10,000, 30,000 person study that says zinc for coronavirus is going to work? Like, that's what they would have cared about. And so there's been a little bit of a shift. I don't think that's going to last, honestly. I think that's just something that for most people is not going to. But we're the bottleneck here. Where really healthcare is going is into your hands, the client, the person's hands. The N=1 movement is real. You can get all your blood work, or a lot of it now, without having to go to a doctor to get it done. And so what we know is that there's going to be more practitioners, more people outside of the physician field that are using metrics like what we're using and optimizing their patients and their clients really, because anyway, they're clients. So in a non-medical framework, so in a coaching framework, whatever that might be, would it be personal coaching for performance, or for elite athlete training, or just regular athlete training, or health coaching in any particular way. So we have people that are coming through that are PhDs in science. We have others that are coming in that are MBAs, and others that have a science background. Typically to do this kind of work, it's challenging if you don't have any health background at all. If you have a neuroscience background, if you have a biochemistry background, if you have a background in the science fields, and you will likely be able to understand this stuff pretty quickly. If you're a self-starter, we know the beautiful thing about the internet is it's a democracy, that's for sure, on some level, depending on what you believe about Google and Facebook and your traffic and all that kind of shit. But in general, you can find information if you want to. And so we know that the real health optimization medicine and practice movement really is going to be the health optimization and practice movement, where there are people like Sherr and I and others on the physician side that are going to be helpful here, we hope, and that also be a resource for those that do not have the licensing that's required to do some of this work. And so the way the organization has worked and is going to work is a collaboration of those that are licensed and those that are non-licensed to work together to get shit done. And on the licensed side, I should just mention, we have acupuncturists, naturopaths, chiropractors that are all interested in the work that we're doing and just using this framework as a way, like I do in hyperbaric medicine, to optimize what they do even more.
All right. Coming back to hyperbaric, because it seems to be a popular topic today, Laura's asking right now, can hyperbaric oxygen therapy treat anemia and rise hemoglobin levels?
So not directly, no. Hyperbaric therapy diffuses oxygen into the plasma or the liquid of your blood. And so it can temporize. If you have a severe anemia and you lose a lot of blood immediately or acutely, it's one way you can prevent yourself from, or allow yourself have enough oxygen carrying capacity to maintain your physiologic function. Without that oxygen, obviously you can't make energy and you can die. And so it's used in trauma settings. It's also used in patients who are Jehovah's Witness and don't want blood transfusions, especially in the acute setting. But over the long term, it's not going to by itself enhance the amount of oxygen that you can carry on red blood cells, because red blood cells are stimulated to be produced by a hormone that's produced in the kidneys called Epigen. And so Epigen is a hormone that's used in patients that are on dialysis, that have kidney disease, that are not making it. It's also something you can get naturally produced if you go to hypoxic environments, so low oxygen environments like altitude training, for example, or if you're a cyclist like Lance Armstrong and take it as an exogenous substance, that's what doping is taking Epigen. So there's a couple other ways to improve red blood cell mass, but those are the major ones, is really altitude training, taking the hormone Epigen, or getting red blood cells, or taking iron also helps. You have to have enough iron in your body to make enough red blood cells. If you don't have enough iron, you can't make them. So that's an important piece too.
Mm-hmm. We've got a number of questions grouped in different categories, but melatonin seems to be a popular question. And Raphael, if you want us to skip this one, let us know. But can you shed some light on melatonin and sleep, correlating specifically melatonin? Increasing melatonin through supplementation leads to an increase in sleep. Is there any correlation that we can make there, or maybe perhaps we can talk about what we've seen clinically?
Dr. Sheikh.
I mean, melatonin is produced by our pineal gland, and it's one of the signaling molecules that go along with sleep. The supplementation does help people fall asleep, but I just don't. It's unclear if it's wise to use this as a long-term thing. I think it's kind of best used in the jet lag scenario where you're changing time zones and you're trying to get your body activated to go to sleep at night, and melatonin's useful there.
Well,
and probably not like harmful to your health.
Yeah. What I was just going to say, Shaker, is that sometimes we talk about, the combination of things at night can be helpful, right? Because melatonin sends one signal, and then we have something like 5-HTP, which can send another, and we have something like valerian root, and then something like CBD or others that have like all these different qualities that can help. But I think it's important, like you said, that we're looking at this in the context of, are you optimizing your health alongside of it? Because if your gut's all screwed up, I know some questions about this too, I saw, Boomer. If you have like a leaky gut, or another issue with your gut, but leaky gut being the one that we most know about, like you may not be able to sleep well because you are too inflamed. If you have a lot of inflammation going on in your brain, you have neurotransmitters that are screwed up, then it's going to be difficult for you to sleep. So it's going to be really something that, if you're having trouble sleeping, it's really more about looking at that foundational health, if you can, first, or at least at the same time as you were looking at how just to get yourself to bed. If there's a lot of anxiety, CBD is actually quite good for that, because CBD helps decrease anxiety. And it doesn't seem to have as much of an effect, I don't think. Shaker, you know more about this than me. But
yeah, CBD seems at the moment to not affect sleep in a negative way.
Right, but THC can, right? I think THC affects deep sleep. Is that right?
THC is not good for sleep architecture.
Right. It's better than something like Ambien or Lunesta, or like the Ativans and the Xanaxes in the world. But the THC, again, is going to mess up your sleep architecture. Like some people just need to get the fuck to sleep, and that's okay. Like, if you're not,
but going back to the melatonin topic, the way we can also increase our endogenous production of melatonin without having to take a supplement is by shielding our eyes with blue blockers from blue light at night, and also reducing the intensity of light. And so our brain will upregulate its production of melatonin that way.
Yeah. I know in Amsterdam right now, and Julia in Kiev, it's about to be blue light blocker time. And one of the things that, as Scott alluded to, is this idea of leaky gut. And it's a trendy topic, and I know, Dr. Pai, you've done a lot of reading on this and research into this. But what do we know about leaky gut in terms of its actual correlations to either disease states or suboptimal health states, versus what is just kind of a finger in the air guess?
I mean, I like thinking of how all things are connected and how everything's a network, in that I don't want to point it to any specific ailment, but I think it could potentially contribute to all ailments. Because basically the food that you eat, if your gut integrity is not intact, and certain food particles or components can trigger your immune system. And so basically, I think about it as if you have it, it could trigger your immune system to act in a way throughout your body in a non-ideal way. And so immune system dysfunction could potentially cause anything. So, yeah. And so if you improve your gut, you could potentially have improvements in a lot of different things.
And everybody's gut is screwed up, is what it comes down to. It's very, very rare that we do the testing and look at some what are called clinically validated markers. These are the markers that are very well known in as we understand more about bacterial overgrowth and something called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, that SIBO, that people know about, and also understanding what these organisms in our gut are doing and how they work not only on their own but together. And you'll see a lot of studies out there, and I'm sure all of you seen like this one's related to Alzheimer's, this one's related to schizophrenia, this one's related to autism, this one's related to depression. But the challenge is that we don't know what all these things do together yet that well, and then testing it's really difficult because your shit changes very quickly. Like the beginning of your crap versus the end of your crap. I'm using lots of euphemisms here for crap here, but the beginning of your stool and the end are going to be different. If you've just eaten something or changed time zone, your stool is also going to be different. So any test that tells you like definitively that this is the diet you should change, you should work on, this is the one that you should eat, is not right. They don't have that. We don't have enough information yet to know what all this stuff means, because there are companies that are telling you this. Tomorrow they may tell you something different because your shit's going to be different. And so what we've been looking to do in the work that health optimization medicine is all about is that how can we take those clinically validated markers and use those as our anchor, but then understanding that the other markers that are evolving and the interactions with all these bacteria, fungus, and virus together is something that we just don't know everything about yet. It's just how to do it in a sort of a network way. So we do know specifically about particular metabolites called small chain fatty acids. Small chain fatty acids are produced by certain bacteria in our gut that are very, very important for gut health. So those are pretty well known, even in clinically validated metrics now in sort of the conventional side. So we focus on those. We focus on something called butyrate. Butyrate is a longevity metabolite. We know that people that have more butyrate in their guts have better, their longevity is greater because it's actually an epigenetic marker. It's something that works on the epigenetic side, like we were talking about before, and helps with certain expression and suppression of various genes that help with longevity. Also, there's a great article that you can Google or whatever search engine, the super poopers of the world. I love this because the more butyrate you have in your stool, the more you are classified as a super pooper, interestingly enough. Butyrate is also, and this is kind of the weeds, but I think it's helpful for people to understand that butyrate actually feeds the colon wall cells, which are one cell thick, and maintains their integrity. So having enough butyrate is really important. So we look at clinically validated measures in the context of measures that are emerging, and then put those all together in a way that you can optimize your gut. But I can tell you that it's very, very uncommon. I think I've had one person that I think I've worked with so far that has in sort of the optimal levels of diversity and optimal levels of gut function. But we're all toxic because of the environments that we live in. It's impossible not to be. But you can optimize even in those contexts, given the framework that we're using all these pillars together, not just gut function, but looking at circadian rhythms and looking at evolutionary biology, et cetera. Sorry, long-winded, but.
Oh yeah, and just to add, it's possible to have issues with your gut even if you don't have like obvious gastrointestinal symptoms. Right. So you don't have to. So for me, I never really have had issues with bloating or abdominal pain or whatever people seem to complain about with their digestive function. Like for me, it's been brain fog and kind of mood dysregulation. So I can get like, my mood can get really off. I can get really bad brain fog, but other people can get arthritis. That's never happened for me. So I can't personally relate to someone who gets joint swelling from foods that they eat, but I know that it happens. And when people remove those foods, suddenly their pain issues get better.
Yeah. One question that came up that I know, Shaker, you've already typed an answer to, but I think is very important because it's extremely common for people, is the idea of waking up in the middle of the night and not getting back to sleep. What's your favorite tip for people to just sleep through the night? I know personally for me, I rely a lot on journaling, particularly before bed, and just getting everything that's in my head onto a piece of paper and just knowing that it'll be on a piece of paper next to my bed the next morning has allowed me to sleep through the night. But, Dr. Sherr, I would love to hear what you have to say about that. What's that one tip that you would give people?
To start sleeping, or is it to sleep through the night? Because there's
sleep through the night. So if you can't sleep through the night, if you wake up at, let's say, 3 a.m., which is a very common problem with people, and they can't get back to sleep, what do you do, or what would you recommend for people?
Yeah, I think when people have this issue with waking up in the middle of the night, there's some issues with their cortisol access, and so they need to probably work on stress reduction in some way. So
that's exactly what I was thinking too.
I would recommend some kind of stress reduction practice, which could be meditation.
Well, the first thing I was going to say, Boomer, is don't have kids. But if you do, that's cool too. Eventually they will sleep through the night. I was going to go the same route as Dr. Shaker here. I think the biggest issue that I've seen is related to cortisol as well. If circadian rhythms are screwed up, some people get a cortisol spike in the middle of the night, and that does happen, and that will wake you up. Now, the silver lining, if you're up in the middle of the night, you have the potential to go back to sleep and lucid dream. There's a cool way of lucid dreaming where if you're up in the middle of the night, you can get back to bed. You can do some lucid dreaming and things as well. So that's another technique. There are nice things about being up in the middle of the night on occasion, but it's challenging if it's definitely something that's ongoing.
Question from the anonymous attendee here. Does energy healing and family constellation have a place in your health optimization? I think
we're all in the energy healing business, right? In the sense of trying to optimize our energy and make us feel better. When it comes down to it, it's really all energy, right? It's all around us in some capacity. At least it's all there, but just everybody defines it differently. The work that I think any healer does is to shift energy in those that are around them. And the best healers out there, that's what they do. They don't have to touch you. They don't have to even be in the same room as you. It's just their ability to shift the way your perspective is going. And this is an interesting thing that I've been considering a lot lately. And I know we don't have much time, so I'm going to go through this quickly, but I still work in a hospital, and the hospitals are extremely quiet. Nobody's coming to the hospital. Nobody's having heart attacks. Nobody's having strokes. Nobody's having, GI bleeds and all these other things that we see very commonly as an internal medicine physician. And the question I have is why? Are they all just staying home and dying? Or are they all staying home and just not coming to the hospital? And the answer, I don't feel is that. I feel that people have shifted their perspective now to focusing on something external, which is this threat, this pandemic. And all of a sudden, they're shifting an energy away from their usual, whatever it is, their heart issues, their lung issues, their bodily issues, whatever, are gone because that's not a problem right now. I'm just focused on this pandemic. And so as a result of that, we're just not seeing everything else happen. So the death rates for pneumonia are plummeting. The death rates from all these other things that we're usually seeing in the hospitals are plummeting. And that's just not just because we're naming them COVID-19. It's because they're just not happening. And I think it's just the power of the shift in perspective that we're seeing. And so if you can shift the perspective to fear, you can also shift the perspective to the opposite, right? Which is more positive emotions, like love, right? Like you can shift, and it's kind of like a hippy dippy thing to say, right? But like, can you shift things to be more, loving awareness instead of fear-based? Shaker, do you want to add something?
I wonder if this person's asking this energy healing question because of certain clues that Dr. Ted has left on podcasts to esoteric things.
Why don't you address it then? You want to address anything esoteric? I thought what I was trying to do is just see how we can address this perspective and understanding that there's always shifts we can make. And I think when I think of energy healing, I think about these shifts in energy.
Likewise. Okay, so Dr. Pai, since you spoke up a little bit there at the end, I want to volley this next question to you because of your knowledge of biochemistry. The average person, what can they do to detox? And I think it's worth clarifying here, just sort of what do you see typically in the way of a person detoxing properly? Because I think there's a lot out there around juice cleanses and these types of things as sort of quote unquote detox, but how would you define detox exactly for the average person?
Again, I like to think of it from the whole network perspective, but I mean, just for an example, when there's something, I don't think we mentioned this at all today, but there's something called NRF2, and the foods that we consider that are, stereotypically healthy foods, a lot of different fruits and vegetables, polyphenols, these components, what they do when we eat them, they trigger our body to upregulate these beneficial processes like antioxidant defense. And so in a way, like eating healthy foods, what it does is it upregulates our body's ability to detox. But then you have to make sure that you have adequate nutrients that can do the job of that. So I think many people are familiar with glutathione, which is like a master antioxidant, and very important in detoxification of different things. Well, glutathione comes from precursors, glutamate, glycine, and cysteine. Glutamate is pretty prevalent in just when you eat protein, but glycine and cysteine can be limited. So someone could take N-acetylcysteine and then glycine either as an individual amino acid or in the form of collagen. But like, yeah, I mean, that's just one example.
Yeah, I think just to summarize there's a lot more to that picture than just people taking vegetables and going on this 5-day juice cleanse. There's natural pathways within our body that we want to make sure are optimized. And so knowing exactly what to focus on and where to focus is a very big point. Coming up to the top of the hour here, let's round out with one question. Methylene Blue. This came up in the chat, actually, sent privately to the panelists, and it was a question around methylene blue. And what is the best way to take methylene blue? Specifically, is there any issue with taking it orally in terms of going through the gut, or is it best to take it as a buccal troche as we have in the blue carnitine product? I'll throw that over to you guys, Dr. Sherr or Dr. Pai, whoever wants to chime in.
I would just say that the methylene blue is highly bioavailable, so it's very well absorbed from the gut. It's actually very, very well absorbed from the mucosa as well. It's just faster if it's absorbed through the mucosa, as opposed to having to go through the gut and first pass metabolism through the liver. So the formula that we use is pharmaceutical grade, like we talked about. and blue carotene, and we highly encourage anybody that's interested in methylene blue on its own to find a reliable source for it. It's not that easy to find. It took us about 16 months to find a reliable source of pharmaceutical grade methylene blue. And it's important because if it's not pharmaceutical grade, it can have impurities, heavy metals, other pollutants as well. So just be aware and think about your sourcing before you take it. There are interesting things that are happening with methylene blue. There are actually some IV formulations that are coming out and being used in other types of processes and conditions, even cancer, interestingly enough. So right now, the easiest way and the only way really for us average users is by mouth, either orally, like the buccal troche like we have, or taking something like droplets and ingesting that way.
Amazing. Dr. Pai, Dr. Sherr, thank you so much for taking the time today and just really going through this. This has been a lot of fun, guys. And thank you guys for Raphael and everybody and Raphael, your name just came up because I'm looking at it, but everybody who's chimed in with questions, we really appreciate hearing from you guys. This has been an amazing time. Yulia, I know you have a couple of things to say before we wrap up.
Yeah, thank you, Boomer. Thank you for running such a great conversation today. I'm sure that this information was useful for our guests and we will have good video. I think that much more people at this moment, because of pandemic, are interested in biohacking and they start to learn this art and science, how to optimize our internal and external environment to get more power over our biology and stay healthy. So we will continue to host our enlightening events. And please join us on social media, stay tuned, and join our big virtual Biohacking Congress on July 17th. There will be great speakers, biohackers, specialists on health optimization, and by the way, Boomer and Dr. Sherr also will be speakers there. Boomer, Scott, Shaker, once again, thanks for supporting us on our mission. That was a pleasure to have you as a speakers today.
Yeah, we have another webinar coming up next week, right, Yulia?
Yes, next Saturday we will host one more webinar on the topic measurement and managing health. You know that measurement is very important in biohacking, and there you could learn main benchmarks and get practice advices on health optimization. And Boomer will be one of the speakers next Saturday. So please join us again and let's discover all secrets together.
Thank you guys for tuning in. It's been a lot of fun.